You never put up a fight, no.
Paradise Club.
Just know me like we knew we never had to say your word, not your show. Silence, you never put up a fight, no.
Paradise Club.
Just know me like we knew we never had to say your word, not your show.
When I left, Francesca sent me a message and she's like, oh my God, Naomi, like there's one thing that we forgot to pack in the boxes. So I'm like, Lord have mercy, what was it? She sends me a picture of the fake eyelash like it was behind something in the kitchen. She's like, you left a piece of yourself. Well, I always knew my parents were famous. I always knew they were well known. I don't know, ever since I was, 4, 5, 6 years old. So I always knew they were well known. I always knew that they had an influence, but in terms of the impact, I would say it's only in like the last 5 to 6 years where I've recognized how significant that impact has been. And I think it's only because I've, in my young adult life, I've made service a priority, serving people, getting involved in initiatives that build communities and that stuff. And so understanding the heart and the sacrifice and the humility that it takes to do that kind of work and authentically do it, I think now I've looked back at what I've seen them do my whole life. I'm like, oh my God, you guys have been putting in the work. Whereas before, I just knew that they were well known because of music. My experience growing up, the more I talk to people, I realize my experience growing up definitely wasn't normal, but it was normal to me. In other words, being a product of music, first of all, means that like you're always around it. So for me, I would be at the studio falling asleep. I'd fall asleep at the studio, and so sleeping to music is not a big deal to me. Or if my parents had a show, after my mom would perform, I would just fall asleep in her arms backstage. So like the bass vibrating on my chest, those are like very sense, like things that I can sense and will bring back a memory. Another thing that was unique about growing up was just having access to a lot of things, and I think only because of being recognized. People like to give to you, like they give you, boy, come to my restaurant and come to my this and come to my that. So access was always like having easy access rather is something that I became accustomed to. Whether it's in the bank or in a supermarket, whatever the case might be, just because of recognition, people just give you access. So growing up, always being identified as something that was quite interesting. I think when I was very young, I was kind of annoyed with it because people would just be like, well, why don't you sing? Or they would try and tell you to sing on the spot, and I just felt like, well, I'm not a clown. I'm not like, somebody's show horse for you to just tell me what to do on the spot. So I kind of rebelled against the idea of music for a long time. And then high school, I'm not gonna lie, was very challenging because the Jamaican school system is still based on the British school system, and there's a lot of value placed on traditional academics. So I've always been a hardworking and talented child, but there are certain areas of schooling that I just didn't flourish in, or rather like maybe I needed different methodologies to learn, like math or whatever. So when I got to high school and it was so competitive, I'm not a competitive person in that way. I compete with myself. So I wasn't driven by coming first in the class, even though when I left elementary school or prep school, I was top of the class, deputy head girl, like flourished, did every extracurricular activity, track and field, boom, boom, boom. When I got to high school and I was just in this environment of like robots, I was like, I'm just gonna chill, like do me for the next, how long, 6-7 years. And there's a part of me that felt very ostracized, because as a creative or a musical artistic person, I didn't function very well in environments that were extremely structured, like sit down, be quiet, whatever. So teachers used to get annoyed with me very quickly and treat me like something was wrong with me, or as if I was a troublemaker. But I wasn't really intentionally trying to give trouble. It's just that like sometimes I'm focusing and I'm singing, or I'm humming, or I'm tapping, or I'm like moving, dancing, whatever. But I always felt like they didn't like me. So high school was weird, but you know, it was a good social setting. I still have some of those friendships. Most of those friendships, I still have them, which, you know, so I mean, for me, the Jamaican high school experience is different because, you know, we start going to parties and these things like from, you know, way too young. And so for us, you kind of force yourself to grow up quickly. And that's interesting because when I got to college, I felt like all the kids that I was in school with were really immature. And I think it's just because we get exposed to a lot of things very early, and you learn behavior. Even if you are not mature in your mind, you learn mature behavioral techniques and how you communicate and how you stand and present yourself or whatever. So yeah, that was a high school and growing up experience. Yeah. You know, when people choose a life of music and art, it's a painful thing to do. Going to high school like I did, which is one of the top academic schools in Jamaica, where you're kind of trained to think about, like, I don't know, career and whatever. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I don't have to be a musician. I can do other things that would give me a more stable life. So I ran away from it for a long time. I started to develop this really weird fear of like feeling like I wasn't a good singer. I was like, no, I have a white girl voice. I don't sing like a black person. You know, in Jamaica, we tend to celebrate those big voices that sound like, you know, church people like. And I've just never had that kind of voice. So I started to get a big fear of that. But music was always in my heart. You know, I would jump in the studio every so often. I would, you know, sing at home, play the piano, but like keep it to myself. Every time I would step out, I would just kind of pull back. And my last question with this hoodie. Okay. Joy is a huge part of the essence of who I am as a person, as a human being. I'm not saying I'm always joyful, but it's something I tap into when I'm in my lowest moments. And so I do believe that I can emit that through music and let people experience that. So that's the first thing. Second thing, I would hope that the song would carry on a legacy that I was born into. You know, when I first started writing music, I wasn't really thinking about genre, I was just writing. And then last March, I made a decision that I was gonna do reggae. I was gonna infuse reggae into what I did because I need to inherit something in this industry that has been built before me. I wouldn't born if it wasn't for reggae. I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for reggae. And then the more I thought about this, I said reggae is one of the few genres that unite so many different people from different backgrounds. You know, people all experience this sense of like peace and joy when they hear reggae, and there's nothing else like it. And so I realized that I had to jump in this, like, what I would call is like a river. You know, if I'm going to inherit something in music, that means something is flowing, that I need to jump in that flow. And so for me, it's an inheritance project as well as just like an opportunity of hopefully sharing something special.
Silence you, baby. You never put up a fight, no. You just know me like we knew, we never had to say your word, not a sound.
Boy.
Yeah, I will just get some B-roll.
Dirty glasses. I can't manage glasses. I don't know how people wear them on a daily basis. It's like an extra thing to do.